Hello, welcome to another TFT mini. We're going to be talking about sizing up enemy lists. You know, you you putting your list down. You're looking at the models. You're saying, "Oh, nice paint job," or somebody's looking at mine. They're like, "Oh, adequate paint job." And then the fun thing about this, Mike, is that this matters from the very, very, very beginning of the process, of playing the game of Legion,
Hmm.
and it starts to matter like a little bit less as the game goes on, but up front it sure matters a lot. So maybe that's the first thing we can talk about when it comes to the way that you handle turn zero. How important is appropriately sizing up your opponent's list?
I mean, it's the difference between immediately losing and
Winning
having
and
a
losing,
chance
some
to
might
winning.
say.
I mean,
Yeah.
like if you don't do it properly, you might just lose on the spot. That hasn't changed about Legion from like kind of how things work, right? And
It was really
so,
easy when you had a 13 act stat list with bombing run.
yes,
You just be like bombing run bad.
yes.
That part has become a little bit more difficult, but it is basically just as important. So like what do we mean by that?
Yeah, so the thing that you need to identify is you need to kind of like look at your opponent's battle deck and kind of identify, like, know what's in it, right? For starters. You also need to know what's in your battle deck,
Yes.
know what the differences are between the two. If
Yep.
you don't know what's in your battle deck, maybe you should go do that before you watch this video. Um, and then and then the immediate next thing you need to think about is what um units in my opponent's list are gonna have high impacts on the objectives we're gonna play. You
Yes.
know, if if your lists are like different, you might have like different primaries and secondaries. Like, do I need to ban this, close the pocket because they have a bunch of fast movers and I don't, and they can get to the middle and I can't. Do we need to not do breakthrough because they can spread out and I can't, or I can spread out and they can't,
It-
right?
yeah. You're all troopers and they have a bunch of vehicles and you're looking at their surface scan like I can drop my tokens just from being panicked and I
Right.
can't do that to my opponent's units.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they've got vehicles, so they probably got droidecas and they've got suppressive, right?
Yep. Yep.
So like if your opponent's got a bunch of suppressive weapons, maybe try to not play objectives that require you to hold on to tokens, right?
And
Um,
maybe avoid bringing them to heal also.
Also that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, so that's definitely step one is you need to identify and I would recommend if this is not something you've done before, every time you step up to a table, you look at your opponent's battle deck, you know what's in yours, and you identify three or four units in your opponent's list that you're gonna actively decide to worry about. Sometimes, even I sometimes get this wrong.
Oh
The
yeah.
four
Me too.
units that I decide that are like not that I'm gonna make decisions around are not actually the four that I should be making decisions around. And that's kind of where you can get into some, you know, scary situations.
And it can get complicated because I care about my opponent's Geonosian warriors for shifting priorities, but I care much more about their Count Dooku for close the pocket.
Absolutely.
And so like it means that there's a lot of variables you need to consider, which is why for newer players I would recommend if you get the chance to play at a game night with somebody who is more experienced, like try to talk through the turn zero with them, so that you can get their perspective on what their thinking is. Because if you're just trying to do this on your own, it takes way more trial and error than may actually be necessary.
That's for sure. I think
Yeah.
a really dirty way to do it is to just look at which four units are the most expensive units in your opponent's army. That's a
Hmm.
good place to start.
Yeah, I
Um,
think that's true.
it might not be completely true, but that will likely be the points are a pretty good indicator of impact.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Of course, this does matter past turn zero. There's also various other parts of the game, although really turn one is where it matters the most during the game, when it comes to sizing up an opponent's list. And this factors into discussions we've already had about tempo and range bands and deployment decisions. And so we don't necessarily need to cover everything all over again, but this is where being aware of the fact that we'll pick an easy one, like being aware of the fact that your opponent has Bad Batch, and that they have played the Bad Batch 3 pip on that turn. This is a mistake that even that I made fairly recently, is not respecting that enough when it came to my deployment decisions.
Yep.
Um, that's that factors into the other thing you talked about, whereas like what are their units that are really going to matter? When turn one happens, you have a little bit more information. You know what the objective is. You know what their command card's going to be, um, and that should factor into all the deployment slash range band related decisions that you make.
Yeah, you should definitely be doing things like, okay, they gave their scanner to Anakin. I need to make sure that I can deal with that. So I need to have two or three units
Right.
that I can counter deploy or whatever, to kind of get them into deal with that situation. Because you're gonna have to deal with it. Like we're playing a game, you have to interact with your opponent, and like your opponent's scanner is gonna be important, right?
Yep.
But you can decide to do that in a couple different ways, though, right? Like if your opponent ends up like deploying their scanner unit early, you could like actively like avoid that side of the table,
Yeah. Absolutely.
right?
And yeah, that's when it comes into like deployment map decision making, which is a video we're going to do in the future. But um, so yeah, like it matters for objective strategy, it matters for range bands. Just like know what which of your opponent's units are going to be the ones that are going to affect the game state the most, and play with a healthy respect for that. Um, and I guess the last way that this stuff factors in, is like when you get later into the game, like your turn two and your turn three, um, you actually need to be actively planning for what your like turn two and three strategy is going to be based on what your opponent's threats are. And like an easy example of that is if your opponent is playing Op Luke, then you're thinking that round two or three, probably three usually, but that they're going to play I'm a Jedi, and that there's going to be a round where your two favorite uh, attack units are not going to be your favorite attack units anymore, and they're just going to be like sitting there twiddling their thumbs. And
They're going to
so,
be hold things in melee units.
right, yeah, exactly. You need to factor that into your decision making in terms of like it starts with turn zero, like we mentioned, but then it also is where you're deploying your units. And so like with that I'm a Jedi example, if you have the opportunity to maybe like spread out your like really heavy hitters a little bit to the point that he wouldn't be able to be in range one of both of them, then that may be something that you want to do. And once again, we're talking about needing to weigh dozens of variables when it comes to this decision, but that's what the game is.
A lot of
Uh,
this is like learning in advance what your opponent's list could be. And I think
right.
your example with I Am a Jedi really speaks to, knowing what could be in your opponent's command hand and
Yeah,
being able
totally.
being able to strategically think around it, right? Like so you see that they have Dooku in their list. What you need to be thinking about is, okay, Dooku has a card that allows him to like double force push a unit when he like force lightnings me one turn, right?
And he has another card that will allow him to effortlessly panic a Courage 2 unit, just like literally without trying,
Yeah,
instantly from 0 to 4.
absolutely. Right. And like you have to be able to kind of look across the table and identify what options they may have access to. They may not have even brought those command cards, although in Dooku's
Yeah.
case they certainly
Yeah,
did.
they sure have.
But
And
like, if they've got Han, you need to know that like reckless diversion is in play, right? And you need to be thinking about that before it happens so that you can be ready for like, oh man, he played Reckless Diversion, and the only thing I can shoot is a stupid Ewok squad.
yeah,
Like,
especially if he has
like,
a slinger squad where one of them is poking out from behind a rock, then you really
right.
need to be aware of what is about to happen to you.
And you
Uh,
can mess with that by managing range bands, which we talked about in
yeah.
like our previous episode. But there's I don't know, there's probably not hundreds, but dozens of command cards in the game that all have different various effects that you're gonna have to need to know. In a casual game, you could probably just ask your opponent like what you need to
Yeah, and
be.
they'll tell you unless they're truly a terrible person.
Yes.
You know, so somebody like Mike,
Yeah, I might not tell you. Right.
just
But
being honest.
you know, a good example is the th Cody 3-pip lat list Ahsoka combo thing going on, right? It's like, you know, most people that I play with that list like don't know it's coming the first time it happens, and then they see it happen and they're like, "Oh, if I had read that on paper, I would have done things differently," right? Um,
Made extra tough by how long the text is on that particular command card.
it is, it is. It might be a little confusing.
Uh, yeah, but to sum up, some might say that knowing your opponent's list front to back is equally and sometimes even more important than knowing your own list front to back, because maybe you are running a list that doesn't have a lot of synergy, getting back to a previous conversation where knowing your own list isn't really adding a ton. But if you know exactly what your opponent's going to do, like you can just win games, even if your list is just like a bunch of blockhead B2s that are charging in and shooting. If you can predict what your opponent's going to do and take advantage of that, then you can come out with the game at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I think this really all starts at make sure that you like really read your opponent's list. Um, I cannot count the amount of games that I've played that I forgot that my opponent had comms jammer on a unit. Um,
Right.
and that would have completely changed how I would have done everything.
Do their BXs have vibro swords?
Right.
That is a
Yes.
huge, charge is a pretty important keyword. We've talked about it many times. Yeah, like so look at the upgrades. Don't assume that it's like the upgrades that you would typically play in that unit. Because even if it's not like a heavy or a leader or whatever, it can make a huge difference in terms of how you treat that unit. So pay attention, read your opponent's list. That's all you have to do. It's easy.
It's like active listening. It actually takes some work.
And now we're getting back into the corporate video realm. We're talking about active listening.
Hey,
Uh, anything else you got to say about sizing up your opponent?
nothing we can cover in 60 seconds.
All right, it is what it is. Well, thank you for watching another TFT mini. If you like what we're doing, consider checking out our Patreon, and we will see you in the next one.